I want to thank you for the invitation to speak. I normally our historian, the Alamo Scouts historian, would do this. I live right here in Sacramento, so they asked me, and I got to learn a lot, and I got to feel especially close to my dad this week. So thank you very much. I'm going to divide the talk and compress some parts of it into three sections. First of all, who were the Alamo Scouts? And has anybody ever heard of the Alamo Scouts? A few. Okay. Well, I'll tell you a little bit more about them. I'll tell you about a few civilian POW rescues that they helped with. And if we have time, I'll talk a little bit about the raid on Cabanatuan. Since we may not get to that, I'll jump ahead and say a little bit right now, which is there is a movie that was made back in 2005. If you're nodding, you've seen it. You can go online and there are a lot of things on YouTube. Everybody seems to like telling this story. So if I don't get to it and you get interested in it, there's other resources for finding out. But first I'm going to start by telling you about who the Alamo Scouts were. Now, they're now recognized as the first ever special forces. They were created to go behind enemy lines and do reconnaissance. In one way, they're defined by their training. When they started this, General Cougar, who was in charge of the 6th Army, wanted to have actual on-the-ground reconnaissance. The prevailing theory was, oh, we only need aerial. Well, he thought that was, I'm sure he put it nicer than this, being a soldier, but I'll call it bullshit. And so he charged this colonel or captain with creating an Alamo Scouts training center. And they went around the world. They drew very heavily on, if you're familiar with the OES that England had during World War II, and basically some of the best special forces techniques the world around. And they compressed that into a 6-week training session. Everybody was supposed to be volunteers. Came to light there were some people that were voluntold that they were going to be Alamo Scouts. But they started with several hundred. They pruned it down, they did interviews, and then there came the final interview. And at the final interview, they talking to the people, and they tell them, they hadn't really told them very much what this is about. This is what you're going to be doing. You're going to be going behind enemy lines and so forth. And a number of men opted out at that stage, so they didn't complete the interview. But for those who said, I'm still interested, then they talked for a few minutes. The next question was, why are you interested in doing this work? Well, a lot of guys got weeded out at that stage because they said things like, I want to kill the enemy. And if you're thinking about it, the best reconnaissance is when you go in and you get all your information and you get out and they never knew that you were there. So some guy who's a hothead and his goal is to engage in combat, he can be a very effective soldier, but he's not what they needed for this unit. And so that was another way men got weeded out. Then after the interview was done, they would escort them to the door, and they'd be saying, well, we'll get back to you. And then as they got to the door and their back was turned, during the interview, on a table, they had this tray that had all these very ordinary things on it, like a comb and a pack of cards and a cigarette lighter, things like that. And there were about 20 objects. So they'd walk them to the door, and they would say, while their back was turned, oh, by the way, what can you tell us about what objects you saw on that tray? And if they couldn't get most of them, they were, they didn't make the cut. Now, one very interesting thing about the Alamo Scouts is very heavy representation, American Indians. About 10% of the Alamo Scouts were American Indians, much, much greater than population. Part of it was, and don't know whether it was cultural, don't know whether it was biological, environmental, who knows what. But they found that overwhelmingly, the American Indian candidates had extraordinary visual memory. So they nailed it. They blew everybody else out on the water on what was on the tray. And that's one of the reasons there's so many. Another part of the ethnic makeup of the Alamo Scouts were Filipinos who were in the American Army. Remember that at this point, the Philippines was an American territory like Puerto Rico is now. And obviously anybody that was Filipino, they'd have language, they'd have culture, they would make very valuable members of these teams. So about 10% of the Alamo Scouts were Filipino. So they'd go to the training camp and they'd all say, all right, guys, you know, the work starts tomorrow. Let's have fun tonight. You know, we've got a poker game, we got checkers, you know, just kind of relax, enjoy yourselves. And we're going to mingle with you so we get to know you. Well, after the guys went to sleep that night, the trainers all got together and compared notes. And if you washed out during Alamo Scouts training, the way it was done is they would just kind of come in the middle of the night after everybody was asleep, and they would very quietly wake you up and take you out. So they compare notes, and so was a real loudmouth in the poker game. And, you know, there was a bunch of people they had observed that just weren't going to be the right temperament for the kind of teamwork that they needed. So the next morning, the guys woke up and look around, and there were some people gone already. So that wasn't the only way there was some attrition. There was one guy that was a great soldier. He snored. Well, you know, if you're going to be several days behind enemy lines and you don't want to be detected, you probably don't want somebody on your team who snores. So he was out. At one point, they washed out an entire team because they were sent on a mock raid. The trainers went in and took a knife from them. And when the unit came back the next day and reported on what they had done, they didn't mention the knife. And it later turned out that they were aware that the knife was missing. And they had a big argument about, should we tell them, should we not tell them? They washed out the whole squad over that knife. So they were very high criteria. So overall, and they got training in things like navigation and judo, living off the land because they're going to be behind the jungle, a lot of self-defense. I'm going to tell you a story about a scout named Terry Santos, and we'll get to him in a minute. But I met Terry when he was in his 80s, and he was about this tall and 110 pounds wringing wet. And one night, Terry went out to dinner, and he's back to his car, getting ready to unlock it, and wham, he feels this tremendous pain on the side of his head. And he was being mugged. And something kicked in with the training. And would you hold the mic for a moment, sir, while I demonstrate? Yep. Okay, here's the cane between the guy's legs. The guy falls down. Knee, shin. There was a woman across the street who witnessed the original attack and called the police, who were there in about 60 seconds. They arrived, sized up the situation, and started to put Terry in handcuffs before the woman could get there and say, no. That's the criminal. So that training, here it is, 60 years later, the training kicked in. So altogether, when the 6 weeks were done, they would have a graduation. Altogether, there were 325 graduates. Now, once you graduated, there was a question that was asked of everybody. Do you want to guess what the question might be? Yeah, did I hear somebody say still want to do it? That was the question. And some of the men at that point said, thanks for the training. I don't want to do this. And so they went back to their units. In some cases, men went back to their units because it was really determined that they could be more valuable there. But altogether, and in some cases, who got retained was what operations do we have coming up? What are our needs? So there were altogether 138 men who were retained with the Alamo Scouts, including my dad. And so that was kind of how that part of it went. Now, there were 4 raids you need to know about involving civilians, or primarily civilians. In Hollandia, and what is our time? May I just ask for a quick time check?
25 minutes. 25.
Left to go.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I can take a little more time with this than I had planned then. The first mission, they were invading New Guinea. They get on the beach at this one end of the island, and these natives come up and tell them, "Look, there's some missionaries that are being kept prisoner. You know, they're about 6 miles inland. We'll take you there." So they took a team of the Alamo Scouts to check it out. Now, 6 miles may not sound like a really long walk. Try doing 6 miles in mud. Try doing 6 miles where some of it is just muddy water that's up to your waist. So it was quite a trek back to the village. About 3 miles in, they ran into somebody who had escaped, and one of the scouts took him back to the beach, and the other 5 proceeded to the camp. And they got to the outskirts of the town, and 3 missionaries met them and pointed out that, well, there's one Japanese officer guarding us. He was sleeping, so he was awakened to the sight of several rifles pointed at him. Spoke perfect English. He'd studied in Canada, and he said, "Don't worry, I'm not going to try to escape." So they took him back for interrogation. You can imagine that it's much more dangerous to capture people and bring them back than it is just to kill them. But you don't get much intelligence from a corpse. So capturing and taking back prisoners for interrogation was a big part of what the Scouts did. And so at that point, they slept for the night, and then they took 3 of the missionaries back with them to the beach. They told the infantry where to go, and that it wasn't guarded anymore. And the infantry then went and rescued them. So it was in Hollandia, about 120 missionaries of all nationalities rescued, including a group of nuns. So that was that one. Next one that came up was Cape Oransbury, and the U.S. controlled the coast there, and the island hopping strategy in the Pacific. So they had what they needed with controlling the coast, and they weren't too worried about the inland where there were 200,000 Japanese soldiers. They just said, "We'll let them wither on the vine." But they got word that an ex-governor named Benyon, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and his family, along with some Javanese employees, were being held prisoner. So the question came up, gee, do we think the Scouts can go rescue them? Well, what were they formed for? Reconnaissance. What is this? Not reconnaissance. They really didn't have, they had combat training, but they had not been trained as commandos. But after much discussion, it was decided, let's give it a try. So there were 2 teams that went. One team took care of capturing a prisoner and neutralizing a machine gun when they were ready to leave. The other team went into the village, and my dad was with that team. Great story there. They thought they had taken out all the guards, and they were in in one of these huts. There was no photograph, so they wound it up. This guy wound it up, put on a record. He's enjoying it. A couple minutes later, one of his teammates comes in and starts shooting, and the bullets are coming like within a foot of him, and he's like, "Well, what the hell? Is this guy gone crazy?" Now, he had a reputation for being a quiet guy who would speak about 20 words a month, somebody said. And his name was Rufo. So the guy that was getting shot at, turned around, and there had been a Japanese soldier that had snuck up on him and was just about to put a knife in him, and Rufo was taking him out. And so the guy wanted to talk about it. Rufo just nodded and went on his way because he was very quiet and things. So altogether, there were about 60 civilians. I'm using round numbers. I'm a round numbers person. There were about 60 civilians that got taken to the beach, and they called it extraction. Most of this stuff happened with rubber boats, dinghies that they would take out to PT boats and stuff. They had to make several trips because the boat didn't hold that many people, but they got them all out safely. Now, so far, everything's been in chronological order. I'm jumping ahead because it's a civilian story, and we'll get to Cabanatuan if we can. But I'm going to guess this crowd, most of you have heard about the Los Baños prisoner of war camp, break off from Santo Tomas and everything. Well, remember Terry Santos? Terry went ahead, he used his Alamo, he went back to his unit, which was the 11th Airborne. He used his training to go and do advanced reconnaissance on the camp. He selected the drop zone. This was like 30 miles or 20 miles behind enemy lines. He selected the drop zone, and then he went in ahead of other forces other parachutists to be there to help guide them into the camp and everything. On his way in, they came across a recurrent theme, I guess, of sleeping Japanese soldiers. But there was a sentry who was asleep, and one of the guys in Terry's unit was about ready to slit his throat. And Terry said, "No, don't do that. He's got a walkie-talkie. We need him, if he's dead, he can't answer, it'll tip them off." So they just quietly tiptoed by him, and he got to live to fight, if not another day, at least another night. So, and altogether, there were 2,100 prisoners liberated from Los Baños. It was quite chaotic, I'm told. They didn't realize that they were behind enemy lines. They thought the battle lines had crossed them. So they had a hard time getting people going. They all wanted to gather up all of their belongings and so forth. But yeah, they got them out. So, okay, we got what, maybe about 10 minutes?
Particularly if we want to leave some time, but I do want to point out we have a Los Baños survivor right here, right? Yes, and a descendant of another one. So,
oh, thank you for pointing that out. Oh, let me talk to you afterwards.
David N. Blackledge, right? Yes. Okay. W, you're W. Okay.
Yeah.
And Sandra Shields is the descendant of one. So that's marvelous. The Los Baños crowd right there.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, right. So wonderful to meet you.
Yeah. So if you five minutes, and then you can take some questions.
Okay, 5 minutes on Cabanatuan. I guess I won't tell the whole story. I'll tell the personal story. During the reconnaissance for it, I saw this on the History Channel. They did a documentary, and two of the Alamo Scouts dressed up like Filipino natives, and they went right up to the gates. There was this. They were very worried because there was about 300 yards of only grass that they were going to have to crawl through. And so they needed additional reconnaissance. And these guys went up into this tower, and they were there all day making all these things. Well, when they talked about how close they got to the gates, my brother and I were watching it. We said, well, we know Dad didn't have anything to do with that. My dad was 6'4". Well, lo and behold, years later, I was reading the book, and I'll hold up these books for a second here, but the book Ghost Soldiers, which tells the story of both the Death March and the liberation of Cabanatuan. And lo and behold, I'm reading it, and they said in the middle of the afternoon, 2 Alamo Scouts arrived who had crawled on their bellies this entire 300 yards to come and get the initial reconnaissance and take it back. And one of them was Harold Hard. So with that, I brought some books if you want to look at them. Ghost Soldiers, Great Raid on Cabanatuan. Those are the 2 best books about the raid. Silent Warriors is about the Alamo Scouts in general. Silent No More is an oral history of the Scouts, and you can look these through if you want to. I brought a bibliography. Linda, would you be good enough to spread those out? And I didn't have an opportunity to make copies, but there are 2 articles written in Recon, which is our official journal, about the Hollandia rescue and the Fuga Island. I skipped over Fuga Island. Okay, well, the Fuga Island rescue. And so my email is on this bibliography that's being passed out. So if you'd like a PDF of that, just email me and I will send it to you. And I think, Linda, you were going to also put something in the next newsletter, correct?
Yes, it's Sally, but that's okay.
Sally, I'm so
I've
sorry.
never had a middle name. I could be Sally Linda if we want. So.
It's been a rough week. What
No,
can I say?
yeah. So I want to see if anyone, let's see if we can just take 1 or 2 questions if there are. Does anyone have a question for Sheila? I'll bring the mic over to you. Any questions? I see one. Dawn is first and then I'll come back to you and then we'll, so regarding the lunch break, and you can stay in here and talk, right? We're going to reconvene at 2:00. But let me first pass it to Don for your question.
I knew Terry Santos for many years. He was a member of Base POW.
What is that?
Base POW, that's our organization.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I think of it as CPOW.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, he told me a story because he was part of the recon team for the Los Baños raid.
Yes.
And he told me that at one point in the battle, he took out a Japanese machine gun position with a phosphorus grenade.
Oh my gosh. Well, he was the real deal. He really was.
He was wonderful. We'd call him a hero.
Yep.
And he called us heroes.
Yeah, I think that's the way it is. I will say this. Everything I read about these rescues, there was a universal sentiment about from the men who participated in rescuing, and it was, we get to do something where we save people instead of kill people. So, and that's Terry.
All right, it'll take me a moment to meander my way back. Thank you. Don't get lost. Yes, not yet. Let's see. Path of least resistance. Here we go. Here's the mic.
Oh, thank you. That was great. Are they the scouts? Were they part of the Army, U.S. Army?
They were part of the 6th Army. Yes, they were Army as opposed to any other branch, and they were
And then
part of
was it kind of a MacArthur brainchild, or what? How did
No.
what was the inception? What
No,
was the idea?
the inception, I'm sure General MacArthur would have liked to have taken credit for it. But the credit goes entirely to General Walter Kruger. He served directly under MacArthur. He was somebody who had worked his way up through the ranks to be a general. And there was a specific incident that prompted him to want to form the Scouts. And that was that there had been a joint military operation. I think it was called Kiska Island, and I think it was in the Aleutians, but don't hold me to that part. But whatever this operation was, there had been the Navy and the Army not cooperating, et cetera, et cetera. And also a lot of this reliance on, we can get what we need from aerial photography. And so he was the one who said, no, I need to have eyes and ears on the ground to give me the reconnaissance we need in a jungle setting.
So was specifically
Wait, microphone.
So it was specifically for the Pacific Theater, and like
Yes.
you said, the island hopping, the islands.
Yes,
Jungles.
definitely just in the Pacific.
Time for one last question.
Here's
One
one.
last question.
Here's one.
Oh, okay, Susie, I'll head over to catch. Sorry. Maybe we'll have time for 2.
The Alamo Scouts, are these different from the Philippine Scouts? Or
Yes.
the Filipino were complete,
Yes.
like islanders, right?
Yes, the
Okay.
the Philippine Scouts were division of the Philippine Army. And the Alamo Scouts were definitely US Army.
Okay, we have one last question over here and then, oh, that overlaps. That was answered. Oh, very, very well coordinated. Wait, did I,
Oh, there's one.
where, wait.
Maybe I missed this, but how did they get to be called the Alamo Scouts?
Oh, I didn't cover that.
History.
Yeah, okay, they have nothing to do with the Alamo, except General Kruger, he was born in Germany, but he grew up in San Antonio, and so it was the general's prerogative to name them Alamo Scouts.
All right, so Sheila's willing to hang out and answer a couple questions. The books are up front here if you want to see. And again, get the materials or get her email address. And so we'll break and we'll reconvene at 2:00.